The silence of space was broken by the gentle hum of the UN Mercy's medical bay generators. Colonel Mira Thorne stood at the observation deck of the Galactic Alliance's forward command station, watching the pristine white vessel drift peacefully through the Proxima Centauri system. The hospital ship bore the sacred Red Cross insignia that had protected medical vessels for centuries, now extended across the stars, as humanity's commitment to humanitarian law remained unchanged, even in the age of interstellar warfare. The UN Mercy carried over 300 wounded soldiers from various species within the Galactic Alliance, along with 50 of the finest doctors and nurses from Earth's medical corps. It was a floating sanctuary in a universe torn by conflict, representing everything humanity stood for: compassion, healing, and the unwavering belief that some things remain sacred, even in war. Colonel Thorne came the voice of Lieutenant Colonel Elena Cruz, her second in command. "We're receiving routine status reports from the Mercy. All patients are stable, and they're requesting clearance to continue toward the medical station at Alpha Centauri." Thorne nodded, her weathered face reflecting years of military service. At 45, she had seen her share of conflicts, but none had prepared her for the brutal efficiency of the Zularan Empire. The reptilian species had emerged from the Outer Rim territories, with advanced technology and an aggressive expansion policy that showed little regard for established galactic conventions. "Grant them clearance," Thorne replied. "And Elena, make sure our escort ships maintain a respectful distance. The Mercy is clearly marked as a medical vessel. Even the Zularans wouldn't dare—" The words died in her throat as her tactical display erupted in warning lights. On the main screen, 3 Zularan warships had suddenly decloaked their sleek, angular hulls, bearing the distinctive purple and gold markings of their Imperial fleet. The lead vessel, a heavy cruiser, was already charging its weapons. "Colonel!" shouted Lieutenant Ron from the weapons station. "The Zularan ships are targeting the Mercy." Time seemed to slow as Thorne watched in horror. The first blast from the Zularan flagship struck the hospital ship amidships, tearing through its unarmored hull like paper. The UN Mercy had no shields, no weapons, no defenses of any kind. It was a ship built for healing, not war. "All ships, emergency response," Thorne barked into her comm. "Intercept course to the Mercy full speed." But even as her words echoed through the command center, she knew they would be too late. The Zularan ships unleashed a coordinated barrage, their energy weapons turning the peaceful hospital ship into an expanding cloud of debris and flame. In less than 30 seconds, the UN Mercy was gone, taking with it every soul aboard. The bridge fell silent, except for the soft beeping of sensor arrays and the distant hum of life support. Thorne felt something die inside her chest as she stared at the empty space where the hospital ship had been. In all her years of military service, she had never witnessed such a blatant violation of the laws of war. "Colonel," Cruz whispered, her voice barely audible. "They're gone, all of them." The Zularan ships had already begun to withdraw, their mission accomplished. But as they turned away from the debris field, the lead vessel transmitted a brief message on all frequencies. "The weak deserve no protection. This is the price of opposing the Zularan Empire." The news of the UN Mercy's destruction spread through human space like wildfire. Within hours, demonstrations erupted on Earth, Mars, the lunar colonies, and every human settlement from Sol to the Outer Rim. Citizens who had never agreed on anything found themselves united in outrage. The attack wasn't just a military strike. It was an assault on the very values that defined human civilization. In the great halls of the United Earth Parliament in Geneva, Representative Mara Lynn stood before a packed assembly, her voice trembling with barely controlled fury. "The Zularan Empire has shown us their true nature," she declared. "They don't just seek to conquer our worlds. They seek to destroy our souls. They have violated every law of civilized warfare, every principle we hold dear." The chamber erupted in applause, but Lynn raised her hand for silence. "We cannot let this act of barbarism go unanswered. The galaxy must see that humanity will not cower before those who would make war on the innocent." President Sarah Chen took the podium, her face grave. The Earth Council has voted unanimously to authorize the deployment of the Fleet of Fury under the command of Colonel Mira Thorne. We will not seek revenge, but we will seek justice. The Zularan Empire will answer for their crimes. Within 48 hours, the most powerful battle fleet in human history began assembling at the Sol system's edge. Ships arrived from across human space, the massive dreadnought Terra's Wrath, the carrier Sovereign, dozens of cruisers and destroyers, and the experimental gravity control vessels that represented the cutting edge of human military technology. Colonel Thorne stood on the bridge of her flagship, the UES Retribution, watching as ship after ship took position in the growing armada. Each vessel carried the best of humanity's warriors, men and women who had volunteered to risk everything for the principle that some lines could never be crossed. Fleet composition report, she ordered. Lieutenant Ran, now serving as her chief weapons officer, consulted his display. 47 ships of the line, Colonel. 12 heavy cruisers, 24 destroyers, 8 carriers, and 3 experimental gravity control vessels. Total crew complement 32,000. And our orders. Proceed to the Zularan home system of Zularia Prime. Demand the surrender of those responsible for the attack on the Mercy. If they refuse, he paused. If they refuse, we are authorized to use any force necessary to achieve compliance. Thorne nodded grimly. She understood the weight of command that now rested on her shoulders. The families of the Mercy's crew were counting on her to deliver justice. The entire galaxy was watching to see if humanity would stand by its principles or allow them to be trampled underfoot. Signal the fleet, she commanded. All ships prepare for hyperspace jump. Destination Zularia Prime. The journey to the Zularan home system took 6 days. During that time, Thorne found herself wrestling with doubts that grew stronger with each passing hour. She had seen enough war to know that violence once unleashed was difficult to control. The line between justice and revenge was often thinner than most people realized. You're thinking too much, Cruz observed during one of their late-night strategy sessions. The Zularans made their choice when they fired on the Mercy. Whatever happens next is on them. Is it that simple? Thorne asked. We're about to attack their home system. Their civilians will be at risk just like ours were. Their civilians weren't on the Mercy, Cruz replied firmly. Our doctors and nurses were. Our wounded soldiers were. The Zularans drew first blood, Mira. Don't let doubt cloud your judgment now. But doubt was exactly what plagued Thorne, as the fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zularia Prime system. Before them lay the heart of the Zularan Empire, a blue-green world orbited by massive space stations and protected by a formidable array of defensive installations. Colonel, reported the communications officer. We're being hailed by the Zularan fleet. It's Admiral Vex Terran, the commander, who ordered the attack on the Mercy. Put him through! The main screen flickered to life, revealing the scaled reptilian features of the Zularan admiral. His yellow eyes showed no trace of remorse or fear, only cold calculation. Human fleet, Terran, said, his voice carrying the characteristic hiss of his species. You are trespassing in Zularan space. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. Thorne stepped forward, her expression hard as steel. Admiral Terran, you are hereby charged with war crimes against civilian medical personnel in violation of galactic humanitarian law. Surrender yourself and your accomplices for trial, and this fleet will withdraw. Tarun's mouth twisted in what might have been a smile. The weak make laws to protect themselves from the strong. The Zularan Empire recognizes no authority but power. Your medical ship was a valid military target. The UN Mercy was clearly marked as a hospital ship, Thorne shot back. It carried wounded soldiers and medical personnel. Your attack was an act of barbarism. It was an act of war, Terran replied. And if you do not withdraw, you will discover what the Zularan Empire does to those who challenge us. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Thorne stared at the blank screen for a long moment before turning to her crew. All ships, battle stations, prepare to engage the enemy fleet. The Battle of Zularia Prime began with a long-range exchange of missiles and energy weapons. The Zularan fleet, though smaller than the human armada, fought with desperate courage, knowing they were defending their homeworld. Their ships used advanced cloaking technology and hit-and-run tactics, making them difficult targets. But humanity's gravity control technology proved to be a decisive advantage. The experimental vessels could manipulate local gravitational fields, disrupting enemy formations and creating tactical opportunities that the Zularans couldn't counter. "Target their command ship," Thorn ordered, as the UES Retribution closed with Terran's flagship. "I want that bastard alive to face justice." The battle raged for hours, turning the space around Zularia Prime into a graveyard of twisted metal and expanding energy clouds. Human ships fell, their crews dying far from home, but for every human vessel destroyed, 2 Zularan ships joined them in death. As the battle reached its climax, Thorn found herself with a clear shot at the Zularan homeworld. The orbital defenses had been neutralized, the enemy fleet was in full retreat, and her ships had weapons locks on major population centers. "Colonel," Cruz said quietly, "we have them. One word from you and we can end this." Thorn's finger hovered over the firing controls. She thought of the UN mercy of the doctors and nurses who had died trying to heal the wounded. She thought of the families back on Earth who were counting on her to deliver justice. She thought of the message that humanity would send to the galaxy if they showed mercy to those who had shown none. "Colonel," the communications officer interrupted. "We're receiving a transmission. It's coming from a hospital ship." "What?" Thorn spun around. "That's impossible. The Mercy was destroyed." "It's not the Mercy, ma'am. It's the UES Hippocrates, one of our reserve hospital ships. They've jumped into the system and are broadcasting on all frequencies." The main screen activated, showing the familiar white hull and red cross markings of another medical vessel. But this time, the ship wasn't defenseless. It was escorted by a full squadron of human fighters, and its communications array was broadcasting a message that would echo across the galaxy. "This is Dr. Sarah Kim aboard the UES Hippocrates," came the voice from the hospital ship. "We carry wounded from both sides of this conflict. We offer medical aid to all who need it, regardless of species or allegiance. The healing of the wounded is a sacred duty that transcends all other considerations." Thorn watched in amazement as escape pods from both human and Zularan ships began drifting toward the medical vessel. Even in the midst of battle, the ancient call of mercy was stronger than the desire for revenge. "Colonel," Cruz said softly. "Orders?" Thorn looked at the targeting display, still showing locks on Zularan population centers. One command, and millions would die. Justice would be served, but at what cost? What would humanity become if they answered barbarism with barbarism? "All ships," she said, her voice carrying across the fleet frequency. "Cease fire! All ships cease fire immediately." The sudden silence that followed was deafening. Across the battlefield, human and Zularan ships slowly lowered their weapons, watching each other warily. "Open a channel to the Zularan flagship," Thorn ordered. Admiral Terran's image appeared on screen once again, but this time his expression showed surprise rather than defiance. "Admiral," Thorn said, "you called us weak because we protect our wounded and honor our medical personnel. But I offer you a choice that will show the galaxy which of us truly understands strength." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Surrender those responsible for the attack on the UN Mercy for trial. Accept liability for the violations of humanitarian law. In return, this fleet will withdraw, and you will live to see another day." Terran's scaled features showed confusion. "You have us at your mercy. Why offer terms?" "Because," Thorn replied, "true strength isn't measured by how many enemies you can destroy. It's measured by how many you can choose not to destroy. The doctors and nurses on the Mercy died trying to heal wounded soldiers. Their legacy isn't vengeance, it's compassion." For a long moment, the Zularan admiral said nothing. Around him, Thorn could see other Zularan officers watching the exchange, with expressions she couldn't read. "You would trust us to honor such an agreement," Terran asked finally. "We'll trust you to be better than you were when you fired on the Mercy," Thorne replied. "The question is, will you—" The negotiations that followed took hours. Representatives from both fleets met aboard the UES Hippocrates, the neutral ground of a hospital ship, providing the perfect setting for discussions of peace. Ambassador Helena Bishop represented Earth's interests, while the Zuluran delegation was led by an elderly scholar named Archivist Sol. In the end, the agreement was simple. The Zuluran Empire would surrender Admiral Terran and his immediate accomplices for trial by a joint tribunal. They would pay reparations to the families of the Mercy's crew and formally acknowledge the inviolability of medical vessels. In return, the human fleet would withdraw without further hostile action. As Thorne watched the last of the Zuluran prisoners transfer to human custody, she felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. The families of the Mercy's crew would have their justice, but it would be justice tempered by mercy, not corrupted by revenge. "Think they'll honor the agreement?" Cruz asked, joining her at the observation deck. "I think they learned something today," Thorne replied. "We all did." The journey home took 7 days, but the news of the Zularia Accords, as historians would later call them, traveled faster than any ship. By the time the fleet of Fury reached Earth space, the galaxy had already begun to change. Other species that had watched the conflict with interest now saw humanity in a new light. Here was a civilization that had possessed the power to destroy its enemies utterly, but had chosen instead to seek justice through law, rather than vengeance through violence. President Chen met the returning fleet at Luna Station, her words broadcast across human space and beyond. "Today, we proved that our greatest weapon isn't our technology or our courage, though we have both in abundance. Our greatest weapon is our commitment to the principles that make us human. We are not conquerors seeking to impose our will on the galaxy. We are gardeners seeking to cultivate a civilization where all species can flourish." But it was Thorne's private message to the families of the Mercy's crew that perhaps mattered most. Standing in the ship's chapel, surrounded by the names of those who had died, she spoke words that would be remembered long after the last star burned out. "Your loved ones died as they lived in service to healing and hope. They were not warriors, but they possessed a courage that no warrior could match, the courage to enter a battlefield, not to destroy, but to heal. Their sacrifice has made us all better than we were. They have made the galaxy itself a more decent place." The ceremonies continued for days, but Thorne found herself thinking often of Admiral Terran, now awaiting trial in a comfortable prison on Luna. During one of their conversations, the former Zuluran commander had asked a question that still haunted her. "Why," he had said, "you could have destroyed us all. Your people demanded revenge. Why show mercy to those who showed none?" Thorne had thought about it for a long time before answering. "Because," she had finally said, "the moment we become the kind of people who would destroy a hospital ship, we lose everything worth fighting for." Months later, as Thorne stood in her new office as head of the Galactic Humanitarian Council, she often looked out at the stars and wondered what the future would bring. The Zularan Empire was slowly reforming, adopting new laws that protected non-combatants and medical personnel. Other species were joining the growing coalition of worlds committed to civilized warfare. The UN Mercy was gone, its crew remembered in monuments across human space. But its legacy lived on in the Zularia Accords, in the new generation of protected medical vessels that now traveled freely between the stars, and in the simple understanding that some things must remain sacred, even in the depths of space. Lieutenant Colonel Cruz, now a full colonel herself, often visited to discuss the changing galaxy. During one such visit, she asked the question that many had wondered about. "Do you ever regret it? Showing mercy when revenge would have been so much easier?" Thorne considered the question, watching a hospital ship drift peacefully past her window, its red cross gleaming in the starlight. "Every day," she admitted. "But then, I think about what Dr. Kim said when she arrived with the Hippocrates. The healing of the wounded is a sacred duty that transcends all other considerations. The crew of the Mercy understood that. If we had abandoned that principle in our anger, their deaths would have been meaningless. She turned from the window, her expression thoughtful. The galaxy is a dangerous place, Elena. There are species out there that would see us all destroyed. But if we become the kind of people who would fire on a hospital ship, then we're no different from them. We're not fighting for territory or resources. We're fighting for the right to remain human. Years passed, and the Zularia Accords became the foundation for a new age of galactic civilization. Medical vessels from dozens of species now carried the protected status once reserved only for human ships. The joint tribunal that tried Admiral Terran and his accomplices established precedents for war crimes prosecution that would endure for centuries. Terran himself had served his sentence, and now worked as an advocate for humanitarian law, traveling between worlds to speak about the importance of protecting non-combatants. His transformation from war criminal to peace advocate became a symbol of the possibility for redemption, even in the darkest circumstances. But it was the name of the UN Mercy that was inscribed above the entrance to the new Galactic Medical Academy on Centauri Prime. Future generations of doctors and nurses from across the galaxy would learn their profession under the motto carved in stone below, "In healing we find our highest purpose." Thorne, now retired and living quietly on a farm on New Earth, still received letters from veterans of the Fleet of Fury campaign. Many asked the same question: had they done the right thing? Had mercy been the proper response to such barbarity? Her answer was always the same. We did what the crew of the Mercy would have wanted us to do. We healed rather than harmed. We built rather than destroyed. We proved that civilization isn't about the weapons we carry, but about the choices we make when we have the power to choose. On the anniversary of the Mercy's destruction, now observed across human space as Humanitarian Day, Thorne would often walk to the small memorial she had built on her property. 357 names were carved into the black stone, each representing a life lost in service to healing. Standing before the memorial, as the twin suns of New Earth set behind the mountains, she would read the inscription at the base. They fired on a hospital ship, so Earth answered with a fleet of fury. But in our fury, we found our compassion. In our strength, we found our mercy. In our power, we found our humanity. The galaxy had indeed answered with fury when the UN Mercy died. But it was a fury tempered by justice, guided by principle, and ultimately transformed into something greater. The understanding that true victory lay not in the destruction of one's enemies, but in the elevation of one's values. As night fell over, New Earth Thorne would return to her home, knowing that somewhere among the stars, hospital ships bearing the Red Cross continued their eternal mission of healing. They traveled safely, now protected not just by treaties and laws, but by the memory of those who had died, proving that some things must remain sacred even in the cold darkness of space. The UN Mercy was gone, but its mission continued. And in that continuation, in that eternal commitment to healing over harming the galaxy, had found something precious, the proof that civilization could endure, that compassion could triumph, and that even in the vastness of space the human spirit could light the way toward a better tomorrow. The story of the hospital ship and the Fleet of Fury became legend, told and retold across 1,000 worlds. But for those who had lived it, who had faced the choice between revenge and justice, between fury and mercy, it was something more than legend. It was proof that in the darkest moments when anger and pain threatened to consume all hope, the light of human decency could still shine through. And that light, once kindled, would burn forever among the stars.